Redefining Poverty in America by Julianne, Rachel, and Julie.
1 million seems like an unfathomable number. Imagine knowing 1 million people, or seeing 1 million faces over the course of one lifetime. Imagine having 1 million words in your vocabulary, or $1 million in your bank account. 50 million is an exponentially greater number, but it relates to many average experiences. The typical man or woman will take over 50 million breaths and have over 50 million thoughts. He or she may eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner over 50 million times and dessert almost as many times. While 50 million people experience this, the same number do not. Not every man, woman, or even child is that lucky. In America alone, almost 50 million people live below the poverty line. Approximately 15% of the population of the U.S. cannot afford to eat over 50 million meals. They can't afford to take time off of work, to pursue high education, or to even save money. The federal government defines the poverty line as a family of 4, earning a little over $23,000 in 1 year. That means that a little under $2,000 would have to suffice the eating, housing, clothing, and other needs for 4 people every month. This number changes according to the number of people in the family, the number of children, and the age of the head of the family, and it is known as the poverty threshold. Families that bring in a total cash income before taxes that is equal to or greater than the threshold are officially living in poverty. This standard is part of the official poverty measure, the current national method of measuring poverty used by the federal government through the Census Bureau. The thresholds are set at 3 times the cost of a minimum food diet in 1964, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, plus 50 years of inflation. The official poverty measure attempts to track poverty over time, compare results across demographic groups, and begins to determine eligibility for federal assistance programs. The Census Bureau gains their information from surveys sent out to approximately 100,000 addresses throughout the states. The official poverty measure has shown promise in the past 50 years at measuring poverty. However, it has many shortcomings. It measures how many people fall below the poverty threshold, but not the depth of economic need of those people. The thresholds don't vary according to geography, even though the cost of living changes immensely not only from state to state but within state regions. Taking geography and living expenses based on location into account alters the look of poverty in America. Reflect modern expenses and resources. It excludes how much taxes and work and medical expenses may take out of a paycheck, while excluding government policy initiatives like in-kind benefits and tax credits. The official poverty measure also doesn't take into account the composition of many families today. People are not necessarily related by blood or marriage, such as cohabitors, unmarried partners with children, and foster children. It doesn't account for unrelated children under age 15 living together, like foster kids, people living in institutional quarters like dorms, barracks, or nursing homes, and people without conventional housing, such as the homeless. The official poverty measure is clearly not a fair representation of the population of the United States. Even though the official poverty measure is not a fair representation, it should not be completely thrown out. Rather, it should be supplemented. The supplemental poverty measure takes into account expenditures over the most recent 5 years on food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. It distinguishes between the needs of workers and non-workers, children and adults. It recognizes variations in medical care costs as well as the cost of living in different areas. The supplemental poverty measure reflects an increase in the standard of living over the past 50 years. It also accounts for government policy initiatives such as in-kind benefits, tax credits, and tax policy. Here are some charts displaying why it is vital to account for the difference in the cost of living by geography, comparing the OPM and the SPM. The supplemental poverty measure makes up for a lot of what the official poverty measure lacks, but still needs to be modified. Under the SPM, both savings and education are not seen as essential. This needs to change. The SPM treats savings for retirement, rainy days, or schooling as luxuries, not necessities. In today's economy, this is both ludicrous and dangerous. The measure should subtract from a family's income education-related spending and basic spending before comparing their income to the SPM threshold. The SPM threshold should also be adjusted upwards for families without health insurance. Currently, the SPM doesn't give extra benefits to families with no health insurance. The uninsured must pay out of pocket for their health care. However, many do not have the resources to do so. A modified SPM should adjust poverty thresholds to include the cost of health insurance. Made to the standards used to measure poverty because it is a multidimensional issue. Poverty is essentially economic deprivation, or a lack of resources. The official poverty measure doesn't take into account the resources needed to provide schooling, housing, utilities, medical care, and food for men, women, and children living in the modern world. By not accounting for basic savings, it makes it even easier for people already below the poverty line to descend into greater economic deprivation. Without systematic reform, over 50 million individuals in the United States alone will continue to want for many basic necessities. The traditional ways of measuring poverty ignore the reality of what poverty really is and where it is located. Altering the SPM and emphasizing its significance will change this for the better.